Bank manager tore up a single dad's $5 check. Then her boss called him. Sir, the entire bank fell silent the instant the check ripped in half. The sharp tearing sound echoed through the marble lobby like a verdict no one could undo. Employees froze behind their counters. Customers turned their heads. A little girl clung tightly to her father's hand, her frightened eyes fixed on the pieces of paper fluttering toward the polished floor. The bank manager stood proudly with the torn $5 million check still in her hands, convinced she had just exposed another desperate fraud. But only seconds later, the front doors opened, and a distinguished executive hurried inside. The moment he saw the quiet single father standing beside his daughter, his face turned pale. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward him, lowered his head with unmistakable respect, and uttered one word that changed everything. Sir, before this unforgettable story continues, take 1 second to support the channel. If you believe kindness always returns, that people deserve second chances, and that appearances never reveal the whole truth, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. No one in the lobby understood what had just happened. Only moments earlier, everyone had been watching the single father with quiet suspicion. Now the most powerful executive anyone had ever seen inside the building was standing before him with genuine respect. The confidence on the manager's face disappeared almost instantly, replaced by confusion she struggled to hide. Yet the greatest mystery wasn't who the man was. It was how someone dressed so simply, carrying an old backpack and holding the hand of a little girl in worn-out shoes, could inspire such respect from one of the bank's highest-ranking executives. Only a few hours earlier, the morning had begun like every other difficult day in Daniel Carter's life. The alarm sounded before sunrise, inside a tiny apartment whose peeling paint and aging furniture revealed years of financial hardship. Daniel quietly climbed out of bed before it could wake his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Every movement was careful, almost rehearsed, because he had spent years trying to make difficult days feel normal for the little girl who depended on him. The apartment was small enough that the kitchen, dining room, and living room blended into one cramped space. The refrigerator contained little more than milk, bread, eggs, and a few vegetables. Daniel smiled anyway as he prepared breakfast, carefully cutting Lily's toast into heart shapes because he knew small gestures mattered when life couldn't provide expensive ones. After breakfast, he helped Lily braid her long brown hair. It was something he had learned through countless online tutorials after losing his wife, Emily, 5 years earlier. At first, his braids had been uneven and messy, making Lily laugh every morning. Now they looked almost perfect, although Daniel secretly wished Emily could have seen how much he had improved. Emily had been the light of their family. She believed every person deserved dignity regardless of wealth. She volunteered at shelters, organized community food drives, and constantly reminded Daniel that success meant nothing if kindness disappeared along the journey. Her sudden illness had stolen far more than her life. It had left Daniel grieving while learning to become both father and mother overnight. He gave up promotions, declined better-paying jobs requiring travel, and accepted flexible work repairing computers from home so he could always be there when Lily needed him. Money became tighter every year. Bills piled higher than his income. The old family car finally stopped working. Some evenings, Daniel skipped dinner, pretending he wasn't hungry so Lily could have an extra serving. She never fully believed him, but she smiled anyway because children often protect their parents just as much as parents protect their children. Despite every hardship, Daniel refused to complain. Each night before bed, he and Lily followed one tradition Emily had started years earlier. They wrote one good thing that had happened during the day on tiny pieces of paper and placed them inside a glass jar labeled reasons to keep smiling. Sometimes the notes were simple, A stranger smiled at us. We saw a rainbow. Dad fixed my favorite toy. We laughed today. By now the jar was almost overflowing, whenever life became overwhelming. They opened it together and remembered that hope often survived inside the smallest moments. 3 weeks before the incident at the bank, Daniel received a letter unlike anything he had ever expected. It came from a prestigious law firm representing the late Arthur Whitmore, an elderly entrepreneur Daniel had once helped years earlier. At first, Daniel assumed it was a mistake. He barely remembered Arthur beyond a rainy afternoon nearly 12 years earlier when he had repaired the old man's broken car outside a grocery store. Arthur had insisted on paying generously, but Daniel accepted only the actual repair cost. What Daniel never knew was that Arthur had quietly investigated him afterward. He learned about Daniel's honesty. He learned about Emily's volunteer work. He learned how they anonymously donated food despite having very little themselves. He learned that Daniel repeatedly returned wallets, cash, and valuable belongings to strangers without accepting rewards. Arthur often said that character revealed itself most clearly when nobody was watching. For years, he secretly followed Daniel's life through mutual acquaintances. While building an international business empire worth billions, Arthur never forgot the young mechanic who refused easy money because honesty mattered more than profit. Having no children of his own and believing wealth should reward integrity rather than bloodlines alone, Arthur made a life-changing decision before his passing. He established a charitable trust dedicated to helping struggling single parents. Then, hidden within his final instructions, he left one extraordinary personal gift, a certified check worth $5 million. It was made payable to Daniel Carter, not because Daniel was rich, not because he was powerful, but because he had spent his entire adult life choosing kindness when nobody expected it. Daniel stared at the letter for nearly an hour, convinced someone had confused him with another man. Only after multiple phone calls and legal verification did he finally accept that the impossible was real. Even then, he struggled to believe it. He wasn't dreaming about luxury cars or giant mansions. Instead, he imagined paying off medical debts left from Emily's treatment, buying a safe little house where Lily could finally have her own bedroom, starting scholarships for children who had lost parents, creating free childcare programs for struggling single mothers and fathers. The money represented freedom, not only for himself, but for countless families carrying burdens just like his. The following Monday, wearing the only suit he still owned from Emily's funeral, Daniel carefully placed the certified check inside a protective folder. Lily insisted on coming with him because she wanted to see the bank where their new beginning would finally start. As they walked through the massive glass doors, neither of them realized that before the day ended, they would face the greatest humiliation of their lives. And no one inside that magnificent bank had any idea that the quiet single father walking toward the customer service desk was about to expose something far more valuable than $5 million. The magnificent banking hall looked almost intimidating as Daniel and Lily stepped inside. Sunlight poured through the towering glass windows, reflecting across polished marble floors and expensive decorations that seemed to whisper success and privilege. Customers in tailored suits moved confidently from one counter to another, while employees greeted wealthy clients with practiced smiles. Daniel quietly adjusted the sleeves of his old navy suit, trying not to notice how worn the fabric had become over the years. Lily reached for his hand, squeezing it gently as if reminding him that they had faced much harder days than this one. Although Daniel had spent several nights preparing for this visit, anxiety still settled heavily in his chest. He carefully checked the folder containing the certified $5 million check and the legal documents confirming its authenticity. Every paper had been arranged perfectly because he wanted the process to be simple. He wasn't entering the bank to impress anyone. He only wanted to deposit the gift that would change not only his daughter's future, but also the lives of countless struggling families he hoped to help. A young receptionist politely welcomed them before directing them toward the manager's office, explaining that deposits of such size required personal approval. Daniel thanked her warmly, while Lily smiled shyly. Several customers glanced toward them with mild curiosity, noticing the little girl's faded dress and the father's inexpensive shoes. They looked nothing like the wealthy clients usually associated with multi-million-dollar transactions. Behind the glass office sat Victoria Hayes, the branch manager. She had built her reputation on being strict, decisive, and impossible to deceive. Years earlier, the bank had suffered several costly fraud attempts, and Victoria had proudly stopped more than one scam. Those successes slowly transformed caution into arrogance. She had begun believing that she could recognize dishonest people simply by looking at them. When Daniel entered her office, Victoria barely looked up from her computer. Her expression remained cold as she motioned for him to sit. Daniel politely introduced himself and handed over the folder. For a brief moment, everything remained calm. Then she opened it. The moment her eyes landed on the amount written across the certified check, her eyebrows tightened. $5 million. She looked back at Daniel, then again at the check, silently comparing the man sitting before her with the enormous figure printed in bold letters. Her questions began politely enough. She asked where the money came from. Daniel calmly explained the inheritance from Arthur Whitmore's charitable trust and offered every legal document supporting it. Victoria flipped through the paperwork with growing skepticism. Instead of examining the documents carefully, she focused almost entirely on Daniel's appearance. She noticed his inexpensive watch, his worn briefcase, his shoes that had clearly been repaired more than once. Her mind had already reached its conclusion long before the evidence had a chance to speak. The atmosphere inside the office slowly changed. Employees walking nearby noticed the manager's increasingly serious expression. Curious glances began drifting toward the glass walls surrounding the office. Victoria finally stood up, carrying the folder into the main banking hall. Daniel followed politely, assuming additional verification was required. Lily stayed close beside him, clutching the small stuffed rabbit she carried almost everywhere. Within minutes, several employees gathered nearby. Customers slowed their conversations. The room grew unusually quiet. Victoria held the check high enough for everyone nearby to see. Her voice became louder than necessary as she announced that the bank would never process fraudulent financial documents. Daniel immediately tried to explain that the law firm could verify everything within minutes, but she refused to listen. Every sentence he spoke seemed only to strengthen her certainty that she had uncovered another attempted scam. The humiliation spread quickly. Whispers floated across the lobby. Some customers stepped farther away. Others shook their heads before they even understood what was happening. Lily looked around nervously as strangers stared at her father with suspicion. She had never seen adults judge someone so quickly. Daniel remained remarkably calm despite the growing embarrassment. Years of hardship had taught him that anger rarely solved anything. He respectfully asked Victoria to contact the attorney listed on the documents. He even offered to wait as long as necessary for every verification process the bank required. But pride had already taken control. Victoria believed asking for verification would make her appear uncertain. She wanted everyone watching to see that she could identify fraud immediately. Without warning, she removed the certified check from its protective sleeve. The room became completely silent. Daniel's heart pounded. Lily stared in confusion before anyone could react. Victoria gripped both ends of the check and tore it straight down the middle. The sharp, ripping sound echoed through the enormous banking hall. Then she tore each half again. Tiny pieces drifted slowly onto the polished marble floor like falling leaves. Several employees gasped. One elderly customer covered his mouth in disbelief. Even security guards looked stunned. Daniel didn't move. He simply stared at the destroyed check, not because the paper itself mattered, but because it represented Arthur Whitmore's final act of kindness. It had symbolized hope after years of grief, sacrifice, and struggle. Watching it destroyed so carelessly hurt far more deeply than any insult. Beside him, Lily's eyes filled with tears. She knelt quietly and began gathering the torn pieces from the floor with trembling little hands, carefully placing each fragment back into the empty folder, as though she could somehow fix everything if she found every piece. That heartbreaking sight silenced even the whispers. Several employees looked away, ashamed. For the first time, doubt appeared across Victoria's face. There was something about Daniel's calmness that didn't fit the behavior of a criminal. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening lawsuits. He wasn't trying to escape. He simply placed a comforting hand on Lily's shoulder and whispered that everything would be all right. At that exact moment, the bank's front entrance swung open. A black luxury sedan had just stopped outside. 3 sharply dressed executives entered the building with unusual urgency. Leading them was Richard Bennett, the regional executive director responsible for dozens of branches across the state. His visit had been scheduled weeks earlier for an internal inspection, but the tense silence inside the lobby immediately told him something was terribly wrong. He noticed frightened customers, employees standing frozen, pieces of paper scattered across the floor. Then his eyes landed on Daniel. For a split second, Richard stopped walking. His expression changed instantly. Shock replaced confidence. Without saying a word to anyone else, he hurried